I'd like to welcome in the Executive Director of the Imiloa Astronomy Center at Hilo. We are talking about Ka'iu Kimura. You may have heard that name over and over again. Lots of success behind her accolades and accomplishments at the Astronomy Center. I know, Ka'iu, you're joining us this morning and you're taking the reins for the Oceanside Chat entitled Ahu Kupanaha ya Hawaiʻi Imiloa, Hawaii's ongoing pursuit of knowledge. Aloha e Ka'iu.
Ai, aloha kakahiaka, aloha nui ʻoukou, mai nei aina o Hilo, kahi nona ka ua hoʻope puahala o upeloa. Nāna hoʻi e lu kalihilihi o nā lehua kaulana o mō kaulele. Aloha nui kākoa pau. Greetings to everyone from here in Hilo, Hawaii, the place famed for the hollow groves of Upeloa and the drenching rains that scatter the petals of our famous lehua blossoms here in Mokaulele. Aloha to everyone. My name is Ka'iu Kimura, the director of Imiloa Astronomy Center here at the University of Hawaii at Hilo. I come from this island, from Waimea, Hawaii, with a very proud heritage. And, Imiloa is an education center that was designed to explore connections between modern scientific inquiry, but through a Hawaiian worldview, and provide educational opportunities both for and with our community. Our Hawaiian worldview, as Kamu mentioned, has a very holistic approach, and it starts from the context of place, genealogy, and language. And on this foundation, Imiloa embraces multiple ways of knowing in the belief that inclusion and diversity strengthen our understanding of the world and of our relationships therein. So the title of our Oceanside Chat this morning is Ahu Kupanaha ya Hawaiʻi Imiloa, ʻAʻole e pau nā hana a Hawaiʻi Imiloa. The Hawaiian value of pursuing new knowledge brings bountiful rewards. A quote that was scribed by Zephyrin Keʻelikōlani in the early 1800s. Keʻelikōlani in this quote describes how Hawaii is a place of bountiful and rich, deep knowledge that has much to be explored. And so that work is never ending. It is within this context that we share with you today about Ahu Ahei Noa, or Calling Forth a Name, which is an initiative that we've been working on at Imiloa and with our partners that is transforming understanding of knowledge systems, cultivating relationships, and advancing our Hawaiian language and perspectives within the scientific community. We want to acknowledge that there is great struggle and tension over the stewardship and further development of astronomy on Mauna Kea, where transformative changes and solutions are requisite for the health and well-being of Mauna Kea and of our community as a whole. Yet, through these difficult times that we're experiencing, initiatives like Ahu Ahei Noa are being born, not because of, but enabled by the environmental circumstances which have raised the awareness and concern to change and do better. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first presenters, Dr. Douglas Simons, who received his Bachelor's of Science degree in astronomy at the California Institute of Technology, and later would achieve his PhD in astronomy right here at University of Hawaii's Institute for Astronomy. He worked at the Canada-France-Hawaii Telescope for years, then joined the Gemini Telescope, working as a systems scientist before becoming Gemini's observatory director between 2006 and 2011. He then returned to Canada-France-Hawaii Telescope and served as executive director for nearly 10 years. In 2021, he most recently returned to his alma mater, the Institute for Astronomy, where he now serves as its director. He is an avid supporter of education and community outreach and has helped to develop a number of programs, including Envision Mauna Kea, the Mauna Kea Fund, Mauna Kea Scholars, and Ahu Ahei Noa. And also joining him is Dr. Larry Kimura, who is a co-founder of the Aha Punana Leo, the first effort to revitalize Hawaiian language using the language as the medium of education. And it has currently established from preschool through college. He has recorded over 550 hours of among Hawaii's last native speakers through a radio program that he produced for 16 years. He established and chairs the Hawaiian Lexicon Committee to create new words, and he is an associate professor here at the College of Hawaiian Language, Haka ʻUla o Keʻelikōlani, who is responsible for degrees up to a PhD in Hawaiian language revitalization. So without further ado, let me begin our Oceanside Chat.
as I said, this connection, it's uncanny. It's awesome, I think, when we begin to realize how fortunate the amount of information, Hawaiian traditional information, or information handed down through the eras. And it's not just what some people may call mythology or stories. It kind of is beginning to connect, as I said, in a very unusual and awesome way to me. And this is something I think that our Hawaiian people and our public in general and the world should know about. And we need to bring that out. And I know not too many people spend their time going through, say, for example, our 2,102 lines of the Kumulipo that was left for us to read now. In the old days, of course, we would have heard it chanted. But it's so unreal that we have that kind of documentation, and that we could spend some time. And many people have written about the Kumulipo, but I think there's still much, much more that has not been put out to the public. So in connecting to what's happening in recent, how do you say, when I say recent, it's because I'm still recent, hopefully, involved, that it's an opportunity to continue this connection to where we left off and bring it up to current times and see where we go from now with that. Because I think it deserves, it's too valuable to not continue. It deserves to be continued.
O te wika huli wala te honua, o te wika huli lole talani, o te witu te ia te talai, ho malama lama I te malama. O ke ua matali I te hopo, o ka wale wale o kumu honua ia. O ke kumu o ka lipo I lipo I, o te tumu o te hopo I poi. O te lipo lipo, o ka lipo lipo, o te lipo kalao, o te lipo o te hopo. Pōhale hoi, hane uta pō, hane ukumuli pō, I te pō he taere, hane upo ele, I te pō he wahine. Ai, 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 ai.
And now I invite our Oceanside presenters, Dr. Larry Kimura and Dr. Doug Simons, to begin their conversation.
Hi, ke aloha no kākou. Ai pā ke ho'olohe mai nei ke kakaiaka I ke kumuhana. Awesome, unreal, and I guess I'm still recent. I heard those comments. And when I say those things in comparison to this very old creation, ko'ihonua, or genealogical record that we have named Kumulipo. Kumu meaning the source and lipo, darkness. So the source of darkness. I feel like just another little I don't know, a dark bit of that darkness that the source of darkness, our Kumulipo, brings forward for us today from thousands of years ago. We are not too sure exactly how old this is, although of course we've had our queen Keʻelikōlani say that it was chanted to Captain James Cook in 1778 by the priest Pu'o. And of course, since that kind of a record, we've had others coming all the way down to our very notable scholar, Davida or David Malo in about the He was born in 1795, but writing had not occurred yet. And so when he was among the first to be educated by the American missionaries at Lahaina Luna, but he acquired writing very soon and was the first to make comment on this in the 1840s. So this is a very, how would I say, a wonderful gift that we have for not only we, the inheritors or the people here, the Hawaiian people, but actually for all people, because it's now been documented, and we acknowledge our seventh monarch, King David Kalakaua, for putting it in writing and publishing it putting it out to the public in 1889. So I would like just to go through the beautiful chanting of Keli'i Ruth and go through again those 14 lines of the beginning, what I call the prelude of the Kumulipo, the source of darkness, or our genealogical creation of the Hawaiian universe. So let me pick up this paper here because I don't have that slide and I haven't memorized all the words. So keau o keau I kahuli vela kahunua, when fundamental space altered through heat. Now, I have understood the word here, honua, as fundamental space, because in the context, yeah, and let me emphasize here that we're taking something very old, going through a whole process of bringing it now to this point in our time, in our journey of connecting back to our inheritance. And mahalo again for having this inheritance documented in writing that I can read today. If I had to hear all of these lines, it would be taking me much more time to do my understanding of the Hawaiian language in bringing forth a understanding through this language now, this English language, of the deeper meaning. So this fundamental space is being produced through heat, right? And okeau I kahuli lole kalani, when the cosmos altered, turning inside out. Now this is very, I'm doing this exactly as our language has been documented. And Doug might have to talk more about these kinds of concepts, because as I'm saying it, I'm just in awe as to what's happening here, you know, what's going on. In line 3, okeau I kukaiaka kala, when the sun was flickering between darkness and light. E ho'omalamalama I kamamalama, attempting to brighten the moon. And okeau o makali'i kapo, when this complete abyss was dotted with tiny stars. O kavalevale ho kumuhonua ia, then began the slime that established a physical space. O ke kumu o kalipo I lipowai, the source of impenetrable darkness, so profound. O ke kumu o kapo I powai, the source of fathomless power reincarnating itself, this fathomless power called darkness. O kalipo, the miraculous, the dark, the deep. O kalipo kala, o kalipo kapo, the darkness of the sun, absolute intense darkness. Po valehoi, it is simply darkness, penetrating and fathomless. Hanau kapo, fathomless darkness procreates, has this power of procreation. Hanau kumulipo I kapo hekane, kumulipo, source of darkness, is born in powerful darkness, a male element. Hanau po'ele I kapo he wahine, po'ele, black darkness, is born a female element. So the prelude and throughout the first 7 or so va or chapters. The Kumulipo, the 2,102 line Koʻihonua Kumulipo is divided into 16 chapters or va. So for the first third portion, the 6 va up to line 600, this word, very small word po, meaning fathomless darkness, is repeated and emphasized. Po no, po prevails. So throughout all of these lines that are very amazingly, after the first 14 lines, our people seemed at whatever I'm calling this committee or this Papa Kahuna, this class of priests or whoever was there at the very beginning to do all of this organizing and thinking. And I am calling it coming up with a theory of this marvelous thing that we call creation. And taking the time and the patience, I'm sure they must have had some discussions and some arguments, and perhaps over a period of time, some changes occurred. And all of this had to be done verbally because we didn't have writing by then, back then, and memorized over all of this time. So, and organizing. So the prelude is very quick, 14 lines, then it gets almost immediately into this question. Now, what about life? Yeah, a question that I'm sure all mankind have come up with and puzzled over. And so our people are presenting in this very ancient Koʻihonua their understanding of what is way in advance of Mr. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, because they begin with the concept of the smallest and smallest that they can see with their naked eye and analyze. And for our people, of course, being oceanic people, into the ocean, the birthing of the coral polyp, asexual birthing. And immediately, now that's another concept, that the understanding is as soon as that happens, there is just a myriad of different explosions almost of birthings of some life form. And the earliest, and again, like the theory of evolution, is the very simple, minute type life, birthing of asexual life forms from the ocean. And it gets to, of course, as evolution goes, becomes more complicated. And eventually, of course, everything that starts from the ocean begins to move onto land. And the way they documented this continuation onto land is through the use of our language. It's not necessarily a biological connection between, say, a seaweed and a fern, or the ekaha seaweed and the ekakaha onto land being anticipated. This is how they saw it, as in anticipation, kia ia. And it's by linked assonance, by ekaha, ekahakaha, the sound connections, and it continues and continues that way. And man is way out of the scene. And there is a emphasis on this, ke akua ke komo, a oe ke kanaka. Only the natural forces exist, and humankind is just out of the picture at this very start of this whole thing. Now, I think this is just amazing to think for us today, this kind of record, simply in our Hawaiian language. And this is part of the journey, right? I've been involved with teaching Hawaiian now for 50 years, since 1971, and being involved in the revitalization of a Hawaiian language. It is not easy to take such language as we see in the realm of use in mele form or koʻihonua form, our creation chants, for example. and understand them very quickly, because this is not conversational language. So it may take a while, but it's amazing to understand the kind of thinking that, of course, happened, because it is recorded so. Now it's up to us to come to this juncture, or many junctures, to catch up with where we left off, because our language now is very much endangered, but still we are continuing to keep our language going, to meet up in different junctures along the way, to become more informed about who we are and what we are. And I think our language is key in doing all of this. So I just appreciate being able to connect through our Hawaiian language to such sources as this koʻihonua. And there are other koʻihonua, or genealogical creation chants. So in our Hawaiian concept, we are not connected to everything throughout the universe by atoms, as the scientists would say, but through genes, we are actually related to everything. So the natural forces play a major role in our traditional understanding of our existence here, and since the beginning. And this is how it's understood through our, such as our koʻihonua, the kumulipo. Now, people sometimes ask me, Larry, how did you know, or how do they knew and about this pole being so powerful, you know, and it's being described in so many different ways. I say, you know, I wish I could ask them, because if you're asking me, I cannot really answer that. I can only say, this is what they left for us. This is the documentation. It's all in our Hawaiian language, and we need to understand that. So just to be appreciative of what we have, and to understand how they understood what was happening around them. And I think we've come far, far, far away from understanding such, how do we say, inheritances through our language. We've come far, far away. I really rely on our primary documentation through the language. And, you know, it's amazing to see that over time, as I mentioned earlier, that several people have engaged in the translation of the kumulipo into English. The first being the queen, our queen, Keʻelikōlani herself, and others. And I see a how do you say, a evolution, a continuation of this understanding. As time goes on, I am amazed that I can't understand the word night being translated for pole. I speak Hawaiian every day, and I use the word pole in my language as night. Yes, that's the word for night, but not in the context as the way it's being used. And this is very important in Hawaiian language, is the way that it's being used in the context of the source of darkness, which is the kumulipo, 2,000 plus lines, talking about the creation of the Hawaiian universe. No laila, mahalo no keia wā pokole. Thank you for this short time to present just some brief understandings and this great appreciation for what we have and this journey of learning as we go. And I'm going to emphasize, I'm a bit biased, but language is at the foundational tool for us to progress in that direction. So mahalo nui loa. I don't want to take up too much of our time now. And Doug, I see we have some coffee in front of me, and I gotta have some coffee.
Mahalo, Larry. That's a great presentation. I appreciate that. I also want to, before we go any further, I want to acknowledge and thank the wonderful staff here at Imiloa who has organized this. Behind the scenes, there's a lot of things going on to make this look really slick and professional, and also the wonderful Hana at ʻUla, who is behind much of the ʻUla program that we're going to talk about later on. So
Yep.
Larry and I are kind of setting up a broader discussion about ʻUla. We have a common fascination about Po and the Kumulipo that we wanted to share and start off the conversation, so to speak, this morning. So with that, I thought that it would be useful to share my mana'o about this in the context of a question that I was asked at the end of the first presentation that Larry and I gave about the physics of Po here at Imiloa over 2 years or so ago. And one of the most memorable parts about that presentation is we had almost as many people packed into the planetarium as are connected online right now. So it was pretty tight in that planetarium. And I was always kind of intrigued by the turnout. It told me that there's a thirst for this, there's a real interest in the community for this story, this message, this mana'o for us to share. The question that was asked, I don't think she'll mind me mentioning, is by Ceci Hope, who's used to work here at Imiloa. She's now at Kamehameha Schools, wonderful person, a natural leader. And she asked me at the end of the presentation, how do you in essence fuse these knowledge systems or knowledge sets together, be it contemporary astronomy and Hawaiian science, and how do you apply it to other areas as well to make it grow? And I thought the answer to that is a good way of providing context for how I approach all of this. And it goes into why I was and remain fascinated by the prelude to the Kumulipo that Larry just shared with you. And it starts with curiosity. And for me, as a scientist, that curiosity is sort of the door opening to new pathways, to new understanding, to new knowledge. And when Larry shared with me the first line of his translation of the Kumulipo, when fundamental space was altered through heat, and Honua had been translated in fundamental space as opposed to Earth, it clicked that there's something really special going on. And Larry's translation, and Larry, I never miss an opportunity to remind you have to publish your translation, or it doesn't count.
Right.
So please publish it and get it out there, because it's a wonderful part of everything here at Imiloa and the broader story we're sharing today. So it starts with curiosity. And it also starts with what I think of as avoiding the perception of being right and just wanting to get it right as a human and a scientist. And when I learn about this wisdom embedded in the Kumulipo, for me, it's another way of providing context as a person, as a human, about our origins. And as an astronomer, that's one of the most important things that got me started in astronomy. I want to know where everything came from. Why are we here? Where is it all headed? And that context, I think, is something everybody searches for over the course of their life in one form or another. So when Larry shared this with me, it's like I said, opening a whole door for context that was answering this core question that I've been sort of chasing my entire life through my study of astronomy. And the separation that's implied of Hawaiian science and a contemporary science, for me, that's an artificial divide. It's a sort of a human construct. My answer to Ceci is in essence that there's a built-in unification between these two stories. The story of contemporary astronomy is about the Big Bang. The Kumulipo describes Hawaiian science, Hawaiian cosmology, Hawaiian astronomy that is positively packed with incredible concepts that I'm still intrigued by very deeply. And so for me, this is all about the story of our origins. And when I think about it, it really seems like that story has a new chapter written in it over time. Everybody gets to write into that story, the Book of Origins. And it feels like the Kumulipo is the first chapter. It's not a different chapter. It's not a different book. It's just the first chapter in that multi-generational story of origins that we all contribute to. In 1,000 years, there'll be technologies and understanding about origins that we can't even imagine. And I have a hunch that they will look back at our current concepts and the Kumulipo and other indigenous populations and their stories of origin and weave it all together as part of the human story that I fundamentally believe it is. So there's no separation in my mind. They're part of the same story. It's unified sort of by definition as I think about it. And I'm incredibly blessed and thankful to Larry and everybody here who's helped sort of open my my perspective to this dimension of the story of our origins, because it's an important one. It's one that is here unique in Hawaii. And it's one that I'm eager to share with Larry and everybody, because it's a beautiful story. And here we are today trying to share it with 230 people. So with that, I want to make sure we have time for the rest of the program as well. So I'll hand off to I guess back to Kai'u.
Ai, aloha ho and mahalo nui loa ya olua. Great thanks to the both of you, both very steeped experts in their various knowledge fields, who both also contributed to the foundations of Imiloa and what Imiloa aspires to achieve and provide to the community. So I want to thank you both for that. You know, Doug and Larry began these conversations exploring the kumulipo and the origins of our universe, amongst the conversation that started brewing a couple of years ago around, you know, our Hawaiian connection to the cosmos, to celestial beings and objects, and how our kupuna named objects that had great connectivity to them, whether genealogically or historically through different events or activities. And so one of a kupuna from our community approached us and asked us why we're not continuing those traditions today in partnership with the discoveries that are taking place on Mauna Kea to further understand our cosmos. And so through those conversations, it afforded the opportunity for real exchange of mana'o and of understanding from different perspectives about the origins of our universe. And it has resulted in us actually naming objects that are being discovered from Mauna Kea that further connect us to the history of who we are as Hawaiʻi, as people, and as people within a universe.